Okay, I'm still getting a whole lot of background noise from somebody. I'm not sure who it is, though. Steven, is that you?
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, but I hear kids in the background. Is that you or is that somebody else?
That's kids. I don't know how it's not. How you're hearing it.
How do we play this?
Hold on a second.
Not you.
Okay.
Hey, how do I do this? Hey, that's...
Okay, perfect.
That's where I was putting it.
Oh, there it is. Thank you, Steven. Okay, so good morning, everybody. This is our BHA monthly call, support call for the month of June, and this is our extended summer call. So Lucia's is going to give us a little bit more time to kind of talk about things and process, and we'll do the same thing next month, and I'll make sure that I give some announcements before we get started. I'm going to send it in an email, and I'll give it at the end as well, because I know we have one person. Jasmine is actually in the car, so she's not in front of a computer. So for next month, one of the things that I'm going to do, I've been given permission to do it if I have the time to plan it, and I'm going to figure it out because I think it's really important for you all to have this. We're going to have a one-day BHA conference, and it'll be from 9 to 5 in Oklahoma City on July 30th. So you don't have to write this down. If you don't have a pen in front of you, that's fine. If so, go right ahead, but I'll make sure I send it out. So July 30th in Oklahoma City, and it's going to be a one-day for us. We're going to practice some engagement techniques, maybe have a breakout discussion about some of the barriers you all are facing with your multidisciplinary teams, as well as maybe even engaging with parents. And that's really what the majority of the day is going to be focused on is engagement techniques. I went to the Department of Education's OTIS conference, and that stands for Oklahoma Tiered Intervention System. So it's a multi-tiered system that schools use to really look at academic and behavioral performance and support. And one of the biggest takeaways that I have that I think that will be extremely helpful for you all that I plan for us to start implementing when you all go back to school is really utilizing the PBIS approach, which is positive behavioral interventions in schools. We have a lot of schools that use it, and we also have a lot of schools across the state and nationally that say that they use it, but they really don't implement it well in terms of it's something that the teachers adhere to, that the entire school adheres to, but they kind of do it in a hit or miss fashion. So the positive thing about it, though, is when it's utilized, it has all these incentives and cost-free ways to really support kids and celebrate them as they make progress with their behavior and academically. So what I'm going to really be working with you all is giving you some techniques to use the PBIS approach in terms of incentives and supports and things like that for you all to implement that with how you find rewards and how you celebrate kids, because it's already something that the school is doing. Typically, like if you've ever seen the Caught You Being Good or the Got You tickets that the kids get at school, or gotcha tickets as they're called, it might be almost like what you may have seen back in the day when you were a kid, like a happy gram, to tell you, you know, good job for being kind, good job for reading your book, good job for using your walking feet in the hall, all those sorts of things. And as the kids accumulate those, they can get prizes. Well, I think one of the things that can also give you guys some huge progress and can connect well with the teachers is already utilizing the reward system that they have in place. So we're going to talk about that at our one-day conference as well. The other thing is we will have another BHA training in the month of July. It'll actually be July 17th and 18th. Now, here's the thing. I'm actually revamping the one-day training to make it 2 days long. So if any of you all went to the BHA 401 training that we did a lot of the understanding trauma information and stuff like that, we did it last fall, it's going to be like that. But what I've really come to understand is that with so many of the schools and the teachers not having a background in trauma and knowing what ACE scores are, it's going to be really important for you all as BHAs to get some of that information on the front end versus the way that I plan to do the 401 training is you kind of do the one-on-one, and then a couple of months later you come back for another layer of training. So what I've decided to do from now on is the BHA training will be 2 days long so that we can have some time to practice dissecting the information and doing that in a trauma-informed way, as well as going through the FAIR cycle. So if any of you all as BHAs would like to repeat the BHA training, you are more than welcome to come. So it'll be not in Oklahoma City, but actually in Tulsa on the 17th and 18th. I've been telling all of the staff across the state that I was going to do a Tulsa training so that we have maybe some people don't have to drive so far. So it'll be the 17th and 18th in Tulsa from 9 to 3 p.m. To allow for everybody to drive back to get to where they're going. So I'll make sure that I send that information out to you. So moving forward, all our BHA trainings will be 2 days instead of 1, and the BHA conference day will be on July 30th. So without further ado, we've been focusing on a student that Becky was working with. She's actually part of a summer camp with the rest of the Oklahoma City Red Rock team. So they're out today, but what we're going to do is continue to work on that and see how far we can get, because I think we had so much information from Becky. At this point, we're going to be working on things today where it's not necessary for her to be able to give particular information for us to advance. So I'm going to get us started. So what we're looking at on today's call, we went through the facts part of the FAIR cycle, and remember, FAIR stands for facts, assess, implement, and review. So we're at the assessment stage, and really what we're looking at today is what's the basic direction for the service delivery. The part about reaching an agreement with the parents and caregiver will come. That's really just getting them on board to see, do they want to sign up to do this, and then we'll be working out those details with you. So brainstorming, looking at the 4 helping strategies: developing new habits, expanding social connections, increasing ways of coping, and improving wellness and self-care. So I'm going to give a quick recap, and then we will go into where we stopped. So the student's name, we're calling him RJ, and some of the next steps that everybody talked about with RJ is helping him to identify his feelings in his body. I believe RJ is about 6 or 7 years old, and he some grounding techniques to help him when he's stressed out. He seems to be getting really stressed during transition times in class or out of school. Becky's first encounter meeting RJ was they were lining up, putting on their coats to get ready to go to the buses and out for car rides at the end of the day. He couldn't get his arm in one of his sleeves. It was like inside out, and he literally ended up rolling all over the floor trying to get his arm in his sleeve. So Becky came up, got down to eye level, and asked him if it would be okay to help him put his arm in his sleeve. With his mom, it would be some of the suggestions from you all and other BHAs was maybe with mom to find some routine at home and find out, investigate if he's ever had his hearing tested based upon his speech issues. So he has a really large speech impediment where to the point where it's difficult for a lot of people, adults and kids, to understand him, which we were also saying may contribute to his lack of frustration because it's hard for people to actually understand what he's saying. With his teacher, next steps that everybody suggested was specific routines in the classroom, talking about transitions, creating consistency with maybe some picture cue cards for expectations, since he's new to reading, and practice some new communication strategies with the teacher where that she can use when speaking to RJ instead of kind of towering over him. When she has a problem with RJ, if she's talking to him, she kind of tends to stand over him instead of getting down at eye level, and finding out how he does after school with bus, waiting for the bus and car waiting would be important to get some more facts. Some other things to find out would be talking to the PE teacher, how is his routine in class, because he doesn't seem to be getting into trouble in PE as much. Talk to the multidisciplinary team about how to help the teacher with all the kids that she has in her class that are Tier 2 and Tier 3 kids. How does she moderate what she needs to do in her amount of stress? And typically what we also see is when you have a cluster of kids that are Tier 2 and Tier 3, there might be some classroom management struggles that the teacher is also experiencing. In addition to that, talking to the MDT team about if RJ has IEP needs, considering how far behind he is in his speech issues. That might be the other thing in terms of frustration. So when we looked at the facts, our takeaway was, when we sum it up, RJ is living in a hostile environment. We know that his dad tends to be, who's in the home with his mom, is sometimes very aggressive and emotionally abusive. The mama says sometimes he says some really ugly things to her and RJ, and he's extremely frustrated, which may be by the language barrier, and he gets very physically aggressive. So what happens? RJ does not follow directions when he's asked by the teacher. Instead, he will continue to roam, destroy things in the classroom, and be physically aggressive with his peers. Like, say, for instance, if he's trying to get from the classroom to the water fountain, there's a kid in the way, and he tends to run wherever he goes. He might end up running over a classmate just like he's just not paying attention. Who's involved is always RJ, the teacher, and typically a few students from the class. So not any students in particular, but those that are in his proximity. So if you're in his way, he might run you over on accident. When does it occur and where? In the school setting, and it doesn't happen at lunchtime. Becky said he's very focused at lunchtime, and he's hungry, and sometimes the teacher will even give him extra time so that he can finish eating his food. So he doesn't mess with anybody at lunchtime. He sits down, he eats, and it typically doesn't happen at PE. And what's his specific challenge is getting RJ to follow directions. The teacher said sometimes it's almost like as if he zones out and he doesn't even hear. If not, there's no sort of recognition, that he even hears that she's talking to him. And Casey, I saw that you joined, so welcome, by the way. So when we looked at unlocking the chain, the worksheet, what do we have to say? What's the habitual pattern of behavior that's getting in the way of RJ having a better way of life? His aggressive behavior towards others, his teachers, his peers, and not following directions. The context, it happens in settings where he has no release for his energy. So you all as a team, we talked about on our call in May that it seems like he has lots of pent-up energy, and he needs to get it out. It also happens a lot during transition periods. He seems to really have difficulty with class transitions and in and out of classroom transitions. The cue, what sort of things lead to RJ engaging in this behavior? Things that we wrote down was a possible language barrier because of his speech issues, his size and his age. He is a repeat kindergartner, and he's slightly older than the kids in his class, so he may be frustrated a little bit. He has a lost point on the classroom reward system. So Becky says there's a lot of times where she goes into the room, and you know how the teachers will keep track of how the kids are doing. RJ typically has lost any points that he has by the time she comes to check on him. The teacher is standing over him when she's speaking to him, and this is a kindergarten class, and transition activities seem to be cue. The content, what specifically does the habit consist of? He's aggressive with his peers or he ignores his teachers. The consequence and payoff from his behavior is he gets attention, he does get his way, and he gets to escape sometimes, and also his frustration with others. Let me see, it's kind of cut off at the bottom. He's pushing them away. So there's plenty of times where he's kind of pushing them away. But one of the things that RJ has said to him is it's important that he wants to have friends, which is a complete contrast to his behavior. So when we look at some of the things that we had about RJ that Becky has been able to get from him is he wants to try to make friends. He does have an extremely short attention span. Some of the things that everybody suggested that Becky try with him worked. In the month of May, it went from him wanting to meet with her for about 5 minutes and being done to he was willing to stay with her for 30 minutes before he was like, I'm ready to go, take me back to class. So allowing him to move around helped a lot. He's excited about talking about some of his favorite shows, Alvin and the Chipmunks and the Ninja Turtles. We were explaining to Becky that it seems like his behavior is not personal, because if so, when he's having a hard time sometimes, he wouldn't let her hold his hand, which he does. So sometimes instead of him running down the hall, what Becky will offer is, would you be willing to hold my hand and we can use our walking feet to get to where we're going? And he's allowed her to do that. So we were explaining to Becky if he really didn't like her, he wouldn't let her hold his hand. And when he's running through the halls, it's not always with her. He does that with everybody. One thing that Becky tried in the month of May that actually got a lot of, I think, buy-in from him is she said, it's okay. He asked if he could get some water from the water fountain, and he looked, and she said, it's okay if you'd like to run to the water fountain. And he couldn't believe it. So he took off running, and then he looked at her, and then she said, it's okay if you want to run back. And he walked for a little bit, and then he darted off running. So her allowing him to have some space to move around has actually helped out quite a bit. And when they have their meetings, one of the suggestions I think we gave her was maybe try something like with a medicine ball, something he can move around on, instead of trying to make him sit still in order to engage with her. And the teacher has tried to give him alternatives to keep him involved in class, and there is a class reward system. So that's our synopsis. Did we have one more person that just joined, or was that somebody else coming back in?
Yes, this is Jeremiah.
I joined a few minutes ago as well.
Okay, I got Jeremiah. Hey, Jeremiah, and who was the lady we had?
Casey Shoemaker.
Oh, hey, Casey. Okay, so
hey,
that's our synopsis up to this point. So where we stopped last time was we got all of the messages kind of boiled down, and this is coming from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network Guide for Youth Understanding Complex Trauma. So it's going to be really important for you all. This is really information for you all to process what a young person has shared with you and what you've observed. Based upon what you know about their trauma history and the type of trauma that they may have experienced will give you a better indicator of maybe some of what they're telling you. Sometimes kids just don't have the words. They don't know how to explain it, but our bodies remember and they explain it. So we kind of went through this trauma guide, and based off what Becky shared, we narrowed down what does it look like RJ is dealing with, and maybe what are the things, some of the things that he said, like it's not fair. So I will sum that up in a little bit, and what we know for RJ at home, there's been a certain amount of emotional abuse, whereas his dad is very verbally aggressive towards him and his mother, which when we look at how he interacts with other kids, it lines out directly to that. So that information is important for you to know, because if you can understand what the kid's trauma history is, this will give you a better understanding of how they engage with you. So like that put into perspective for Becky some of his running and always seeming like he can't concentrate, where that could be coming from, that it's not personal to her, the teacher, he really just has a whole lot, he's almost like kind of overstimulated and hyper-aroused, and at the same time, he has all this energy that he's not able to get out. So the next thing, this is where we're going to spend probably about 20 minutes on this, is there is a checklist. It's called I call it for short the lagging skills checklist, but it stands for like the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems checklist. So I think this is a good tool to use. Pam Tooley, our coordinator of trauma and resilience, she shared this with me, and we think it's a really good tool for you all to be able to help teachers connect the dots, because, again, they don't have the trauma information. They don't understand about ACEs. They'll get some of that, but it really needs to be more in a concrete way to help them understand what they see. So what we talked about the last time, I put a star by the ones that everybody agreed upon. It sounds like they're things that RJ is struggling with. So what we're going to do, the lagging skills checklist is all about taking the challenge that a student or a child is facing and stating it as an unsolved problem, so that you can build a plan and have goals around what skills are we trying to beef up for that kid. So, you know, we need to identify what the issue is, but it needs to be stated in a way so that we can reframe it to know what it is we're working on. So with this lagging skills checklist, it could be something that you and the teacher can go through together. You know, I'd probably say about less than 5 to 10 minutes. A teacher will be able to complete this for one of their Tier 2 or Tier 3 kids. Like if you said, okay, for RJ's teacher, I just want to sit down with you and get your thoughts on what difficulties you see RJ facing. To give the teacher this lagging skills checklist, is the information is stated in language that a teacher can understand. These are concrete things that they can see. So what we said was, for RJ, we agreed these are the difficulties, and Becky made sure that we didn't miss any, that RJ is really lacking and having a hard time doing. Difficulty handling transitions, shifting from one mindset or task to another, difficulty persisting on challenging or tedious tasks, poor sense of time, difficulty maintaining focus, difficulty considering the likely outcomes or consequences of his actions, in parentheses, impulsive. So like, you know, the whole thing of him running kids over and then wanting to make friends but not understanding that, you know, that's going to impair your ability to make friends if that's how you treat other kids, is a perfect example of that. Difficulty managing emotional response to frustration so as to think rationally, difficulty deviating from rules and routine, and the last one was difficulty seeking attention in appropriate ways. So at this point, RJ is getting lots of negative attention, but it sounds like from what we can glean, he's really lacking the skills to know how to get positive attention from his teacher. So he's getting attention, but it's getting his name taken off, he's getting points lost from the reward system instead of points given for what we really want to reinforce. So when we look at the tips for writing these, and this is what we're going to do, it's going to take us about 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to actually write out the unsolved problems. And I think this is good practice. I want to encourage everybody to participate in this, and if you're at your desk and you can write these down or type them as we're going along, that's great. You don't have to be steeped in being a BHA to do this. This is just one of those skills where the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get. So what they say for writing the unsolved problems is you usually begin the sentence with the word difficulty. It shouldn't, the statement should not make a reference to the child's challenging behaviors. So, for example, it says you wouldn't write screams and swears when having difficulty completing word problems on the math homework. Instead, you would write difficulty completing the word problems on the math homework. So we're looking at what is the actual skill that the kid is lacking, but we're not referencing the behavior. It shouldn't contain any adult theory. So this is not where we put the trauma information in. So instead of writing, it says you wouldn't write difficulty writing the definitions of the spelling words in English because his parents were recently divorced. You just might write difficulty writing the definitions of the spelling words in English. You don't need to put anything about all the background stuff that's happening. This is just like doing identifying the problem behavior in a functional assessment, in that it should be split up and not clumped together. So it says you don't want to write difficulty getting along with others, but rather difficulty agreeing with Chad on the rules of the four-square game during recess. So you want to be very exact. It also says that it should be specific, and two strategies that can help is to include details related to who, what, where, and when, and what expectation is the child or student having difficulty meeting. So we want to leave out the actual behavior, focus on the difficulty, no adult theory, and be very succinct. So I am going to, please ignore my ugly desktop, I'm going to put a side-by-side so that as we're writing this, it can be something that we can reference and see as we're writing out the lagging skills. Okay, let me blow this up. Can everybody see this okay? All right, we're going to start with the first one at the top. And when you open this document that I sent you, you see that it has like the cursor there. You can, it's a PDF, but it actually is typable, so you can write in it. You know what I'll do, as a matter of fact, let me just pull it up and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Does anybody have any questions before we get started, what we're about to do?
No.
Okay. So you see how big it is, right? So it's available for you to print out, or you can literally just type. Now I say that and then it was acting crazy. You can just type into it. So I'm going to pull up, I'll keep this as a reference which ones we're doing. So that's the first one. All right, so let's start off with the first one. I'm going to give us, we'll see how far we can get. I think we can get all of them in 30 minutes. Let me check all of them off so everybody has the visual. Who has that? Who is at a computer? 2, 3, 4. Do you all think this is something reasonable that could be done with the teacher, that they would be willing to do to help figure out what needs to happen to help their students?
I think it would help out tremendously.
Yeah, it just depends on the teacher. You know, I know they feel overwhelmed and overworked as it is too. So I don't, you know, so I guess you have to take a gentle approach towards this with the teacher. So.
Good point. And I think one of those things that might help is, you know, there's some teachers where they'd be like, oh, yeah, no problem. I'll get this finished and give it back to you. I think for a lot of teachers, if you can ask them for 15 minutes of their time and let them know that this information is going to go to help create a plan around the students' behaviors that they've been seeing in class, and kind of sit down with them like how you would a parent going through the Ohio scales, and let them look at it and then, you know, maybe talk it through or sit there with them and let them know. I mean, I think honestly for a lot of the kids that they have, this would take a short amount of time. That might be the way to go, especially if you have a teacher that's overwhelmed. Because if you give them something and say, I'll come back and get it, it doesn't matter how short it's going to take. The perception in their mind is like, I just don't have enough time to do it. So it might be more useful for those teachers where they're just struggling to get to just keep all the balls in the air, to ask if they have 5 to 10 minutes and sit down and do this, do it with them. So let's start off with the first one. Let me pull the little sheet so then everybody can see what the guideline is. I'll put this up here on top. So I'm going to do this in a way so we can keep track of what we're, of course I didn't say. Okay, so our first one is difficulty handling transition, shifting from one mindset or task to another. So how can we write that as an unsolved problem? We want to start off with difficulty, so we got that word. So what do we want to say for RJ? And he's in kindergarten. We know that he's having different difficulty shifting between, like, leaving the room, coming back in the room, you know, lining up for the end of the day. How we want to say it? I think I heard somebody speak up.
Would you say
Becky Benton, Brittany Grimes.
Oh, okay. Hey, team. This is our Red Rock team that joined in. Okay, so I got, hold on one second. I got Becky, Brittany, who else? Was that everybody, Becky and Brittany?
Becky, Brittany, Tara Rogers, and Christy Cavaco.
Tara Rogers, and what's Christy's last name?
C-A-V-A-Z-O-N.
Oh, Christy. Okay. Hi, Christy. Sorry. We're actually working on the lagging skills checklist for RJ right now. Okay, so I hope I didn't throw off whoever was about to speak. Okay, so who was about to speak up and say, how did they want to state the difficulty handling transitions?
Melissa Rock.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say, I was just going to say difficulty not running in the hallway. Or maybe it should be difficulty with walking in the hallways, since you're not supposed to mention the behavior.
So difficulty walking in the hallway. Do we want to say something?
Transition.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Melissa. You cut out again.
During transitions.
During transition. Okay. Good job. All righty. Let's try the next one. The next one we have is difficulty persisting on challenging or tedious tasks. So how do we want to state this for RJ?
Should it be difficulty paying attention?
Difficulty, let's dig a little bit more. Difficulty, because no, let's save that one for, we have one on maintaining focus, so we can,
okay.
Let's try that one there. Okay, so you said difficulty, say it again?
Paying attention or just staying focused?
Difficulty staying focused. And let me ask Becky, Becky, did you say for RJ that he has difficulty staying focused when it's individual work, desk work? If you're talking, you're muted. Becky, can you hear me? And Brittany?
She said yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Okay. Difficulty staying focused on individual desk work. How do you want to say that? Do we want to say desk work? You all know what I'm trying to say, like when the kids have to do an assignment by themselves sitting at their desk. How do we want to say that?
Desk work sounds good.
Okay. Is it any specific subject matter, Becky, or does it not matter if it's individual desk work?
You could say assignments.
Say that again?
You could call it individual.
Just say assignments.
You could call it individual seat work. Part of his, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Part of his attention problem is just the environment around him. And so it's, and I don't want to say attention deficit, it is just transitioning into any new task. And so individualized seat work becomes an issue in the fact that he has to have paper in front of them and a pencil and then listening to instruction and then following that instruction.
Okay, so maybe what we can add to that is difficulty staying focused on individual seat work and following instructions from the teacher?
Yes.
Okay. And you're also, Becky is also saying that his classroom is chaotic, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All righty. So we could add another one for maintaining focus. How could we state this about the environment for him, about him staying focused? So difficulty.
Maybe difficulty concentrating on what he's supposed to be doing and not what's around him.
On individual seat work and not the classroom environment. Is that fair to say?
Yep. Yep, sounds good.
Yes.
Okay, and that would be one of those things where we know that's something that we would have to be working with the teacher and the MDT team for that specific thing, because what Becky is saying is like that classroom is hard for anybody to concentrate. It's just overstimulating. So now if we look at so we got that one for maintain focus in the first one. Let's go back up here to difficulty persisting on challenging or tedious tasks. So Becky, for him, is the hardest time, is our tedious task for him anything where he has to work on it by himself?
Yes.
Okay. So how do we want to state that, everybody? And here's some examples again. Let me scroll down. And we're talking about for persisting or challenging or tedious tasks for him is work where he has to do individual seat work by himself. So how can we make this specific? And how do we want to state it?
What about difficulty completing? What about difficulty completing? Difficulty completing a task because see, when you work one-on-one, you have to be self-motivated too. So I was trying to tie in difficulty completing it, like the assignment or task, in order to stay focused. So I was trying to figure out how to pull that together. So.
Okay, so somebody help Marvin pull it together.
I would say having a difficulty in putting his effort towards his skills.
Putting his effort towards what? What did you say?
His skills task.
Mm-hmm.
And I could barely understand. You said difficulty putting his effort towards what?
His skills task.
Okay. All right. So difficulty completing. Okay. Difficulty putting effort towards. How about we say individual classroom tasks or classroom work?
Or classroom seat work or something. So.
Okay, classroom seat work. Does that sound good, everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you see, it takes a little practice, but and I when I've done it before, I have to keep referring to the rules so that I'm not putting the behaviors in there. I'm not putting any adult theory, none of our trauma stuff. That is very clear and concrete. And Becky, if you have, if we're going through these, if you have any examples that we need to be either more succinct, like, if it's, sometimes for, let's say for kindergartners, when my son was in pre-K, they did the spinners where they have to rotate. He had a particularly hard time rotating from the imaginary center where they could like dress up with costumes and hats and do whatever they wanted. That was the one center where he struggled the most. Or like if I would think about my daughter, she loves the babies in the kitchen center. So for her, if I was talking about difficulty transitioning, I would know based on what the teacher would tell me, those would probably be the hardest transition points. So if you have any more particular information as we're going through this, feel free to just throw that in there, okay? Okay. All righty. So we've done the top three. Now, no, we've done almost all the top three. We need to do poor sense of time. So, Becky, when you said poor sense of time for him, can you give us a brief understanding of why you said he has a poor sense of time?
Well, I think it's just a developmental thing with him that he doesn't understand that 10 minutes is the actual, 10 minutes of what we do. So, when I bring him down to my office, walking down the hallway, I would try to have a conversation with them on what we were going to do and how that was going to happen. And then I always tell the kids to look at my clock and show them where the big hand is, and then we'll work on this until the big hand gets to the 8, because they have no concept of what 5 minutes or 10 minutes looks like. And so I try to give him a visual cueing as well as reminding him to look up at the clock and show that the hand has moved and we're getting closer to the end or to the next transition.
Okay, thank you. That makes total sense. So for RJ, that also could create a problem for him in the classroom. There could be times where maybe he's antsy because the teacher said we only have 15 minutes till lunchtime, but that can be a hard concept for him to understand. Or if he's still getting used to seeing the clock, and sometimes teachers or parents use timers like an old school cooking timer. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes a little sand in the, like if you can get one of those big sand, what do you call them? The sand timers. Those could help.
Hourglass.
Yeah, thank you. I can't get my words together. Hourglass. I know from my daughter sometimes what I'll do is she's able to read the clock now, but if she's like, well, how long is it going to be? I'll be like, it's like watching one episode of the Bubble Guppies or Teen Titans, and she'll go, oh, okay. She knows that's about roughly 30 minutes. So if I say 30 minutes, she'll be like, what? But if I say we will be done before you can watch an episode of your favorite show, then she goes, oh, okay. That makes sense. So those are technical things, but that also, like you're saying, Becky, that's going to be a process because we're teaching him to build his ability to understand time. So how do we want to say this for RJ, that him having a poor sense of time? How do we want to state this difficulty?
Could we just say difficulty understanding sense of time?
Yes, I think we can do that. I'm trying to put these in order, so let me. Difficulty.
Understanding sense of time.
Understanding. Now, if we want to make that just a little bit more concrete based upon what Becky has said, how could we drill that down to the who, what, where, and when for him? Because he doesn't care about him having a poor sense of time. Doesn't hurt him in PE. It's not a detriment to him at lunchtime. it really is a detriment when he has to focus on specific classwork or challenging work that's hard for him to do. That's when the poor sense of time really becomes a problem. So how can we drill that down?
What about the processing time? Because he can hear it, but understanding is there too. But when he has to process it in his mind, so
difficulty understanding and processing time. How about we add, because it's not all the time, it really is a problem when it's outside of PE and lunchtime. Does he have an issue with sense of time at recess time, Becky? Like, is he ever one of the kids where it's hard to get him to come back from recess?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to get him there. It's hard to get him back. Yeah, he is just like a little, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but to get it, he's like a Tasmanian devil. He's running down and spinning out. Then he gets the recess. He kind of spins out a little bit, and then coming back into the center.
Okay, so like she talks about, he has lots of sounds like pent-up energy.
Yeah.
Marvin, were you going to say something?
yeah. So he understands when the whistle blows that it's time to go in, but he can't process why I have to stop and go in and have fun if I'm having fun out here, and that's why he'll, probably would run away from the teachers or do whatever, and that's why he has a hard time coming back in. He understands the whistle blew, but in his mind, no one has explained to him why he has to stop and go back inside.
Okay, so you all are getting to it. So it sounds like, why don't we say for RJ, he has difficulty processing time limits during transitions. And, okay, we might need to put this into two sentences. So he has difficulty processing time limits during transition, and we can put recess, we say hall activity, because you said he has, it's in the class and out of the class, Becky, right? So, so we could say difficulty processing time limits during transitions, like recess,
PE,
classroom transitions, right? And then the next one would be difficulty processing. And this one maybe is more like someone had just said understanding. For this one, so what you were saying, Marvin, for the first one is he knows that the whistle is blown. He understands that, but he doesn't like it. When it's something that he's really enjoying doing, he has a hard time transitioning to the next thing successfully. So when we come to him having difficulty understanding time, then we could look at when he has to perform a difficult or tedious task, he has a hard time understanding how long he has to stay focused on it. Like for him, like if Becky says, you're going to be with me from this hand to the little hand, that could seem like 3 hours to him. At that point, it's something that is hard for him to understand. Or if the teacher says, okay, everybody's going to sit down and do their seat work for 10 minutes, and then we're going to come to the activity rug, 10 minutes to him may seem like 100 hours. Does that make sense? Because when it's something difficult, he actually has a hard time understanding it, but he understands it when it's something that he's loving to do, and he has a hard time processing. So it's kind of just a slightly bit different. So how do we want to say it for him having a hard time committing to staying in tedious tasks and him having a poor sense of time around that? How do we want to say it? Difficulty understanding. Sound like somebody was about to say something. Somebody take a stab at it that hadn't tried. Be brave. The only way it's going to make sense is if we practice it.
What if you said difficulty accepting time limit?
Okay.
Instead of understanding.
Oh, we got to take out the behavior. So switch out a word for express. Would we say, because for him, Becky, will he start on the work and not complete it, or does he even have a hard time getting started on the assignment?
Well, it depends on what it is. I mean, it's part of his difficulty. It's just self-regulation, and then if the task is something that he views is going to be difficult, then he's quick to give up or throw the paper on the floor. So
Okay.
it's just, you know, a lot depends on this little guy. If he gets to school and he's had breakfast and, you know, I can look at him in the morning, and if he's disheveled, then his whole day's going to be disheveled.
Right. So, but let's narrow it down to right now with the lagging skill. Like, are there particular types of assignments or work subjects, school subjects where he gives up automatically? Like for myself, I am not a math person. I'm an English and history person.
Right,
all day
that's
long.
math is hard for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So difficulty, how about we could make two for this one? So if we look at this one, math would be one where it's hard for him to even get started. So difficulty getting started. How do we want to say this as it relates to poor sense of time with his math work? He won't even get started on that, is what you're saying. Individual seat work. Anybody take a stab? How can we sum this up into one sentence for him having a poor sense of time as it relates to doing individual math work?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What are you asking?
Okay, so we're on the lagging skill of poor sense of time. But what you were saying is when it comes to something like him doing individual work in his math, he gives up from the beginning. So what we're trying to get at is his poor sense of time is like, it's overwhelming. How do we state that as it relates to him having a poor sense of time, specifically when he's doing math work?
Maybe we could say something like difficulty utilizing specific time frames during math assignments.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of boil it up to say difficulty utilized given time to start and complete math individual seated math work. Does that sum it up, everybody?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Looks good.
Okay, so we have one more for this poor sense of time because Becky is saying this is a big factor for him. So the math work is one where he would throw his stuff on the floor. Let's see how they mention it as an example. Let's see. Okay, so there's nothing we need to say about the behavior because I was about to state the behavior. So, Becky, you said for other things, he will, starting on it isn't a problem. It may be him actually finishing them up. Do you think that relates to poor sense of time, or does that fit into one of these other lagging skills?
No, I think it's all a poor sense of timing.
Okay. Okay, so with one of the other assignments where maybe he doesn't, his behavior isn't that extreme, where he's like, I'm done from the beginning, you said he'll, you know, if it's moderately tolerable or he thinks he can do it, he'll start on it, but maybe he's not finishing it up. Are there other particular subjects where he has that train of thought?
Well, he likes to do anything that involves coloring. Is that what you're asking me? Okay.
No, any other subjects or times where he struggles with sense of time? Okay, so maybe you are answering the question, just I'm looking at it a different way. So when it comes to math work, he gives up from the beginning. Like, it's just,
right.
I can't do this, it's too much, I'm going to be working on this forever, and he's done. When it comes to something like coloring, does he have a hard time stopping? Does he have a hard time with the limits, like what we were talking about at recess and PE and transitioning and stuff like that?
You know, I probably not observed that. I mean, it's all about what his currency is, and what I mean by that is if the next task presented is something he wants to do, then he's willing to stop and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but like to, you know, counting on his fingers, even using manipulatives, and I don't do a lot of that because that's teaching part, but in my classroom, in my office, trying to get him to move from one thing to the other so we can even have a conversation. I know that math and concepts of numbers are difficult for him.
Okay.
And so,
number
concepts, right.
And you said number concepts?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so basically, so what I hear you saying, Becky, is his core sense of time, when it comes to something that he really loves and enjoys, then it's just like outside. He has a hard time shutting down. He wants to keep doing it, so he gets lost in the activity, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what we can do, we can actually roll that one into up here that we have on difficulty processing time limits during transition. So we put recess. Does he have a hard time leaving PE? Or does he feel like he kind of got it out?
I haven't really observed that, and that's a whole different building and a whole different situation. I know that we've left my office to go to PE, and that's usually at a dead run to go. So I know he likes PE, and the PE teacher's pretty cool.
Okay,
and she's got a good grip on
the management part, right? Okay,
yeah.
So I'm going to take off recess and put classroom transition, and I'm trying to find a way for us to kind of write maybe we don't need to put it. Like the whole idea, if he's doing something he really likes to do, then he loses track of time. So maybe just putting the transitions is good enough. If we have recess and classroom transitions, do you all think that's good enough, or do we need to put something in there about his difficulty processing time is not just about the transition itself, but it really is about things that he enjoys doing? I don't know if that needs to be in there. What do you all say?
Well, I'm not sure how you would make that an objective. That becomes kind of behavioral a little bit.
That's what I was thinking. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're all learning this as we go. You see, it can be, if this is the harder part where you wouldn't have the teachers to do this part, they'd be like, oh, brother, this is like another job. Y'all go handle this part. You just need them to do the actual lagging skills, like check off the lagging skills, and then you can sit down and come up with the unsolved problems and also pull in your observations and what the teacher has shared to make them very specific. Like if you know that the kid is struggling during specific times of day or on specific subject matters, or maybe like, the kid has a hard time when it's time for them to be called upon because it's hard for them to be understood, all those sorts of things. You would actually write the unsolved problems, but the teacher is going to be the one who just does the checklist part with you. Okay, so we've done pretty good. We only have 3 left. So what I like to do here is, since our call was 2 hours, we're going to end at 11. I'm going to give us a 5-minute break. So you don't have to log off the phone if you don't want to, just in case anybody needs to take a restroom break, get up and stretch their legs. I know that Jasmine is driving. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will resume. Let's just resume at 10:15. That'll actually be more like 12, 13 minutes. So let's take a short break, and we'll come back. Everybody come back by 10:15, so you can just put your phone on mute, and then we will start back where we stopped with the unsolved problems, okay?
Okay.
Roger that.
All right, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So everybody had a quick break. So now we are down to, we only have like 3 left. So we're down to difficulty managing emotional response to frustration so as to think rationally. So when we think about RJ, when he gets really frustrated, he can destroy things in the classroom, not just his own classwork, like how Becky mentioned, throwing it down. He can want to throw stuff, and that's basically what he does, is he'll destroy things in the classroom when he gets really frustrated. So how do we want to state this, not focusing on the behavior, but on the actual difficulty? And let me ask one question quickly. Becky, when he gets frustrated and it impedes in his ability to think rationally, is it during these task transitions, or is it something else with, instructions or something the teacher is asking him to do?
It's probably just changing from task to task, so probably just through transitions. One of the things that I noticed with RJ is that you need to give him enough time to process the request, and that's not always built into teacher time, that for him to self-regulate himself and to pull himself into what's being asked of him, I know that the teacher doesn't give enough wait time.
Okay, for him to process what she's asking him to do.
Right, just process the request.
Okay, so basically that could be like, RJ, sit down, or, RJ, come line up, put on your jacket and be quiet, and then she's like, okay, do it. So he doesn't have enough time to process what she's asking him to do. Thank you, Becky. So how do we want to state that, you all, for his difficulty managing his emotional response to frustration, and it impedes in his way of thinking rationally? How do we want to state that? Somebody take a stab. Take a stab. I know somebody has to be brave. Becky gave us a lot of information.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, okay, so the one that we're working on is difficulty managing emotional response to frustration as to think rationally. So if we're putting this in our stated problem, the unsolved problem, Becky is saying that she sees the difficulty for him is it happens during transitions, but mostly the teacher is asking him to do something and she's not giving him enough time to process the request, and he gets really frustrated, and then he starts to get aggressive. So how do we want to state this as an unsolved problem?
Well, you can say difficulty in observing themselves while they're in the midst of experiencing their feelings.
Okay, say that one again, and without the behavior in it, but restate it. How would you say it again?
Well, you can say they are having difficulty in observing themselves while they are experiencing problems or issues.
Or difficulty processing information.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Difficulty with self-regulation.
Okay, so if we have to boil it down to the problem without the behavior in there, it sounds like what I hear you all saying together is difficulty processing the request from the teacher, correct? because he's having a hard time. He gets upset.
That's perfect.
And he acts out when the teacher is asking him, but it's because the teacher is doing it so rapidly, he doesn't have enough time to respond and think through it.
Right.
Okay, so difficulty processing request from the teacher for, and Becky, you're saying it's for, this is on like activities or things that she's asking him to do in class, right?
Right.
Related to activities, tasks, and how do we want to say it when it's something that the request is giving, the teacher is giving him a request that's related to management, like classroom management, like, you know, RJ sit down, RJ line up, RJ get off the floor. How do we want to say that?
Can you just put direction?
Or redirecting.
Good job, direction and redirection. Because she might go, I would imagine that she's going with direction first, and when that doesn't help, then she tries redirection, which might be way too rapid for him. You guys are getting the hang of it. We only have 2 more. So difficulty deviating from rules and routines. I'm gonna put the, what do you call it? Here's an example of what we, you know, how we write it. Do we have anybody else that joined the call? Somebody new? Okay, I'm just double checking. Okay, so difficulty deviating from rules and routine. So we know we start out with difficulty. Becky, I think you were the one that started this for RJ. So what difficulty, what rules or routine does he have difficulty deviating from? Is that when there's like a substitute, or it's a special day, or, you know, like it's close to break time and that's just hard because the whole routine and the schedule of the day is very different?
Well, one of the things that happened in the last 9 weeks is the other kindergarten teacher was out with a long-term sub, and so the teaching assistant was not consistently in the classroom for his support. And RJ does really well with guided practice, like, you know, taking him literally by the shoulder or by the hand and showing him what needs to happen next, and that was not available to him. So one of the things that I saw, and I don't mean to sound like complaining, but when you have a support built in and you take the support away from him without any replacement, he was kind of left on his own to try to navigate. And so it was, I knew that if the teaching assistant wasn't going to be in the classroom, then it was all going to break out and break loose. But that was because that affected all of the children.
Right.
So it became kind of a popcorn kind of thing that, you know, he's looking at me and I didn't get the support I needed. And so I don't know how to address that individually other than he needed guided practice and some physical assistance to move into the next expectation.
That makes sense. So basically, like, the teaching assistant would do some modeling for him to actually show him what to do. And of course, if that just literally dropped off the map, like she's been there for the entire school year, and then, you know, the next week she's gone, she's out, and there hasn't been any transition out of the support that he had into something different. So, how do you all think we could sum this up? Because really, that's like, part of that is RJ, in terms of he was trying to do the best that he could, but also the support that he has is not there. So his difficulty is deviating from maybe the created plan of classroom support, or like how do we want to state this? Because
so what if we said difficulty when dealing with change and support in the classroom?
Difficulty with dealing with change of in-class
support in classroom.
Support
Staff
in classroom. And what we can put in parentheses is removal of classroom assistant or absence of classroom assistant. Should we say that?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to make it more specific because it's not just like he was, quote unquote, acting up because the assistant wasn't there. He was having a hard time because the person who modeled the behavior, like what Becky is saying, the teaching words, the guided practice, was absent. So he didn't have somebody modeling for him.
Right.
Okay, so our very last one, does this language sound like language that the teachers use? Not with the unsolved problems, but with the checklist. If you all think about some of the things that the teachers would readily be able to see as red flags with their kids, do you all think that it's fair to say the things that they see on the left are what they're focusing on and what they see?
Yeah, I think this is something that they could observe in their classroom daily.
Right. When I think about how teachers talk, and Becky, I think you're one of the only people on the call with that that classroom experience, and maybe Marvin has some too. Does this language sound like something that teachers could readily follow based upon how they talk and how they note things that stand out in their mind with kids that kind of fit into Tier 2 and Tier 3?
Yes,
Well,
I think it's something yeah.
I think so. I mean, that's the language that I use with the teachers.
Mm-hmm. So this is why it's huge. Why we think it'll be a big benefit, because if you take the time to have this sort of discussion with the teachers, and like we say, it's brief, they'll be able to give you a quick rundown for the kids that they have. But this is language that they use. They're like, yes, finally something that makes sense. Like, I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but what I can tell you is this kid is not focused. I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but I can tell you this young man has a hard time with transitions. So it's language that is not going to be hard for them to comprehend. So our very last one is difficulty seeking attention in appropriate ways. So Becky, can you give us a very brief example for RJ? We know that he's getting negative attention from his teacher. What's an example of how he has difficulty seeking attention in appropriate ways? And one example that Becky did share when we first started a couple of months ago is he liked a little girl. I want to say she was in the first grade, and he wanted to show that he liked her, but he didn't know the right way to do it. So he saw her in the hall, he ran over to her, and he grabbed her and gave her this really tight hug, but then he wouldn't let go until the point where the little girl was like, okay, let go of me. And then I want to say Becky or a teacher came to kind of pry him off, and then he took off running again. So he wanted to show her that he liked her, but he didn't know how to do that in an appropriate way. And Becky, could you give us one other example of how he gets attention in negative ways, or he seeks attention in negative ways, please?
Well, he's a hitter and a kicker. So if he doesn't get his way, his fist balls up, and he'll hit whatever's closest to him, and that usually is a student. So his his acting out is always physical.
And like you said before, Becky, it's not particular to any kid. It's just like if a wall is closest, he hit a wall. If a kid is closest, he'll hit a kid. And he honestly does not connect the dots that, like, this is going to make it difficult for you to make friends if you go around kicking or hitting everybody.
Right.
Okay.
So one of the things that I do when he's with me is we do lots of high fives. We do fist bumps that blow up. We do 2 fist bumps that blow up so I can engage that physical need for him to touch, but yet do it in a positive support.
Gotcha. Okay, so how do we want to state this unsolved problem for RJ? Difficulty seeking attention in appropriate ways. Somebody take a stab at it. How do we want to state this problem?
I'd say difficulty understanding behavior and reaction of others.
Difficulty understanding his behavior and the reaction of others?
Yes.
Okay. So let's figure out a way to replace that behavior to take the behavior out. So I'm going to put in here
perspectives.
Say that again, Stephen.
What perspectives work? His perspectives of others.
I'm going to look up here. Well, I guess we can't say frustration. So,
engagement.
Okay, so what we're trying to say is he knows when he gets frustrated, he doesn't see how his actions affect others. But we can't put the behavior in there. So how can we be specific about the strategy that can help and remove the behavior out? Does anybody have an idea? I'm even stumped on this one. Let's see.
Hey, what's your question again?
We're on the one on difficulty seeking attention in appropriate ways. So the part that Stephen had at the end was, well, he said at the beginning, difficulty understanding, and at the end, the action. Oh, go ahead.
Wouldn't it be like how to communicate? Because that would be a communication issue, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Difficulty understanding how to communicate.
Yeah. Mhm.
The action.
It's kind of like regulating
your
body, regulating himself as far as his excitement or sadness through the communication, like to regulate at a more appropriate level.
Okay, so, but we want to take the
word
regulate out just because that sounds more behavior. So when he's trying to say words or he feels a certain way, he uses his body instead of his words. Like what Becky is saying, that's why she tries to put in high fives and stuff. So difficulty understanding how to
communicate his feelings?
Yeah, to communicate his feelings, or it might even be his thoughts. And let's see. Go back to did somebody say something?
What about social cues?
Difficulty on how to socially communicate his feelings and thoughts, and what it results in is he hurts other people. He can hurt other people physically, the physical other people. So let's see here. I guess it would just be, we could stop there because the physical part is the behavior that we don't need to focus on. The focus is on he doesn't know how to socially communicate his feelings and thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or we could say how to communicate his feelings and thoughts with his peers or to other people.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because sometimes it's not just about who's around, like Becky's saying. It doesn't matter. People could be around him or a wall could be around him. Whoever is around RJ is going to hit him. All right. Somebody is outside pressing mute. Okay, so now we'll go back to the slides. That was the hardest part. You guys did an amazing job. Let me pull back up the PowerPoint. Uh-oh. All right. So I'm going to replace this one with what we did. I'll put that in the slide later. So what we know about the Ohios is here's what we have for RJ. I think this one is his mom's. Mom agrees that he has a hard time sitting still. He seems to have too much energy. If we look at only just the things that rank at the top, this is one thing to help you all. Look at those things that the parents and the caregivers and the kids rate the highest. Arguing, fighting, yelling, fits of anger, refusing to do things that his parents or teachers ask. In the family assessment, Mom feels like they spend too much time arguing. It is hard to know what the rules are in her family. She's including, I think, the dad into this. She thinks that her family is there for her, but she also doesn't know what to expect, and it is okay to talk about her feelings. When we think about extreme troubles on the function scale for RJ, this lines right up with what the teacher and what Becky was saying, inability to think clearly and make good decisions, and having quite a few problems with some other things like feeling good about himself, completing household chores, which goes to instructions and maybe things he doesn't want to do, like we all don't with household chores, controlling emotions, staying out of trouble, ability to express himself. He has trouble with that, accepting responsibility for his actions. Let's see, Mom has been stressed out and has been to the emergency room twice in the past 90 days. She's hopeful, but what we know is that she's stressed. So when we look at that, I want to say that when we compared Mom to RJ's Ohio's, what we saw that was missing was RJ actually put that he's very lonely. So if we think about his acting out, he rated that he has some difficulty with his acting out, but the thing he was focused on was he really feels like he's by himself and he doesn't have any friends. So I'm going to keep saying this as a reminder. We changed this in March, but what we want you to do is moving forward for the worker version of the Ohio's, and this will be during school time. So over the summer, you'll be doing the worker form if you're able to still have contact and work with the kids that are signed up through wraparound and service coordination. You complete the worker form if there's one due over the summertime. But during school time, and this is for our traditional BHAs and for our BIS sites, is if the referral and the issue you're working with the kid on originates in the school setting, we want you to have the teacher to do that worker form. So just like how you would have a conversation about the lagging skills, I would suggest that unless you have a teacher that's really gung-ho, sit down with them to help them complete the Ohio scale. And the reason we're doing this is we'll be able to see, hopefully from the E-team this month from this last spring semester, that we can get more accurate information on the kids' problem and functioning scales, because the teacher is going to be the main person observing the behavior even when you're not in the classroom. So that's the hope of having the worker form to be completed by the teacher. So right now, if your kid has one, your kids that are on your caseload have one that's due over the summer, you complete it, and when you go back to school, it will be the primary teacher. So when we look at RJ, that was from our kid that we had before. I apologize for that. RJ's lagging skills, I'm going to put them all on one piece of paper so we can glance at them real quick, and then use the last couple of minutes for looking at starting one of our lagging skills. So here's the trauma messages that we got from RJ. I'm going to give you all a second to kind of look at these. I'm weak, I'm sad, he's moody, his body is fidgety and restless, sometimes he's exhausted, he can't make eye contact with people, he said it's not fair, I don't understand why I do some things, sometimes I just lose it, I can't make or keep friends, I hide my needs and my feelings from others, make myself invisible, I don't tell others how I feel or what I need. Becky has said, like, his speech impediment is so severe, that could be one of the clear reasons as to why. Sometimes he doesn't know how or have the words to describe his feelings, thus, like we talked about, acting out with his body. He gives up on trying to be good, quote unquote, and he's being the person he's been told that he is. And I do things I know are wrong and get myself into trouble. And again, all of this is coming from when we pull the information from the Complex Trauma Guide for Youth. So this is not new information. I just typed it up in one slide. So when we look at RJ's lagging skills, I'm gonna pull the lagging skills from what we developed, so we can put that in one place for RJ. Here's some of the lagging skills that RJ has. I'll give you all a second to read through those. You all did an excellent job trying to boil all of those down. You see, it takes a little bit of time to kind of reframe our mind so that we're taking out the behavior and we're focused on the specific skill and task that kid is lagging the ability to really be able to perform or do. So for RJ, we have clear things like difficulty walking in the hallway during transitions, difficulty putting effort towards individual classroom seat work, difficulty processing time limits during transitions, recess classroom transitions, difficulty utilizing given time to start and complete individual seated math work and number concepts, difficulty staying focused on individual seat work and following instructions from the teacher, difficulty concentrating on individual seat work and not the classroom environment, difficulty processing requests from the teacher related to tasks, activities, direction, and redirection, difficulty dealing with change of supports in classrooms, so the absence of classroom-guided practice or modeling for transitions, and difficulty understanding how to communicate his feelings and thoughts to his peers and other people. Now, when we look at that lagging skills list, is that language that you think the teachers could follow? Once you've written those out for RJ, do you think if you went back to the teacher and said, I'm gonna be working with RJ to really build a plan around these skills, because again, these lagging skills that we identified for RJ, we didn't just base all of that off of what the teacher said. We got that from our observations, as well as what RJ had shared with Becky up to this point and how he expressed himself up to this point. So do you think it's fair that the teacher might be a little bit gung-ho about if you gave the teacher a set of, this printed lagging skills, these unsolved problems list, and say, I'm going to be working with RJ to really build a plan around working on these things that we've identified in the classroom? How do you all think the teachers would respond to that with this type of language?
Well, this is Becky, the way that I know that going into a teacher's classroom with
Becky, you sound really far away. You were close at first and then you faded out.
not being overbearing, and I think if you concentrate on using language that they're familiar with, rather than redirecting something that the teacher is doing in the classroom. Because you want the redirection to go to the student and not to the teacher.
Okay, so you're saying for the word redirection, do we need to be more specific on that, or could you kind of fade it out?
Oh, sorry. We're in a car. Well, yeah, I mean, the redirection, one of the things in talking to this particular teacher is in her desperation of wanting me to do something with him, it's just pulling him out of her classroom and out of her line of sight and then bringing him back in, you know, being able to tell her this is what I did and the redirection needs to be this way for him. So it's telling her what RJ needs rather than telling her what she needs to do. Does that make sense? So it's not like I'm telling the teacher what to do. I'm telling the teacher what RJ needs in a supportive way.
Right, and I think that's the beauty of this, the way that this is stated, like it's about difficulty processing the request from the teacher. It's not focused on how the teacher is interacting with them, even though we know that's part of it. It's on the fact that RJ is having trouble meeting the teacher.
Yes, meeting the expectations. Yes, okay, that makes me feel better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And does anybody else have any thoughts? Like, do you think if the teachers could see, like we said, you don't have to give the teacher the copy of the completed plan. There might be a couple of things that you're asking the teacher to do to help support the student and better connect with the student. But these things could be clear things that you can help the teacher to understand. I recognize what you're saying creates a disruption in your class where you're having difficulty with this student, and when we build a plan and I'm working with them, we're going to be really keying in on these specific issues that you have highlighted, the student has highlighted, and what I've observed. Do you think that that would be fair for the teacher to be on board with it? How do you think the teachers would respond to having the language given to them in this sort of way where it's not directed at them but really about how can we just improve what's going on where this kid is falling short? How do you think they respond?
From my experience and the teachers that I work with, I think they would respond well because a lot of times they're like, Marvin, I'm at with and I don't know what to do. Any advice, any tips, any techniques, or anything? And so I think a lot of them will be receptive to receiving new and different ways on how to work with the kid and because anything to help them keep their classroom in control. And, you know, I think they would, you know, every teacher is different. You got the old school one, and I'm not saying every one of them will, you know, receive it, but I think the most of them will because they need help. They, you know, the ratio of the teacher to student is like 25-1. So what teacher wouldn't want that added support and help on a different way on how to work with the students? So I think they will, you know, receive it.
Right. So what I want you all, this is really like a selling point to the teacher engagement. And even sometimes it might even be your multidisciplinary team. This can be a really big benefit because, like what Cindy is saying, from being a teacher, and like I told you all in training, you really want to refrain from being very pointed with the teacher, especially when if you're not coming from the education community. If you haven't been a teacher, for the teachers, they can get they can feel very personally attacked. So you want to make sure that you are not stating things in a way. We do understand from our wraparound perspective, in order for things to progress, everybody has to be willing to compromise and do some things differently. But what you don't want to come off from the teacher's perspective is the outside person coming in who's not a teacher and telling them you're doing all these things wrong, and you need to be the one to do the majority of the changes. What we're really looking at here is, what does this student need, what skills do they need to have to meet the classroom expectations? And in reframing it this way, it really is looking from a positive behavioral intervention support type perspective, a PBIS model of if we want the student to improve in their lagging skills, that first starts with the teacher modeling and helping to create that environment, and that's part of the expectation the teachers already know. So that's stating things in a way where they're not feeling attacked. So we already know what mom's concerns are from the Ohio scales. She has the same concerns that the teacher has. So when we look at from Toby's point of view, I think, how would you all boil it? I mean, from Toby's, RJ's point of view, how would you boil it down from maybe what he shared? RJ loves to move. He does want to make friends. He feels lonely. What do you think are the main things that maybe he wants to change right now? He has a hard time getting people to understand him because of his speech impediment, and he's not always in trouble. He does like to get attention, but at this point he doesn't always know how to express himself that doesn't involve being physically aggressive, either kicking an object, destroying an object, or hurting a person. But he has feelings, and he is very physical. So what do you all think would be the key goals from RJ's point of view?
I feel that he may want to feel more inclusive with his peers.
Brittany, say that again and kind of step away from the mic just a little bit. You were kind of muffled.
Oh, okay. I was saying that I feel that he may want to feel more inclusive with his peers.
To feel more included with his peers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else would you all say? If we had to come up with probably about 5 from RJ, and RJ is about 7 years old, what do you think, 6 or 7 years old, what's important for RJ from his point of view and how he's expressed himself?
For people to be able to understand what he's trying to relate to them. So maybe.
Okay, for people to understand what he's trying to relate or convey to them.
Right.
All right, what else?
I think he would like more understanding from his instructor.
So we're starting from the teacher?
Yes.
Okay. What's a really simple message you think RJ is saying? If we had to come up with what type of learner RJ is, we know that Becky has said that he needs guided practice or basically somebody modeling for him. He loves to run around. He likes a lot of play that's physically involved. What type of learner is RJ? If you all had to take a guess.
He's a kinesthetic learner. He's got to be moving.
RJ is a kinesthetic. I can never spell this right. Whew. I was like, I'm so close, and I missed an H. He's a kinesthetic learner. So for RJ, it's like, I need to move to learn. He also has lots of energy, right?
Yes.
I have a lot of energy. So if you don't give him a place and a way to challenge it, he will find a way to burn it off, whether it's built in or not. I think that's fair to say. It sounds like Becky has said that he loves coloring a whole lot. He even had a whole conversation with her about his favorite color was red. So he likes to draw, right? And with crayons, correct,
Yeah.
Becky?
Yeah.
I love to draw with crayons. I think there was one other thing I had from RJ's point of view. It just went out of my head. Does anybody else have anything else that RJ has basically said in no uncertain terms? Oh, I know what it was. The fact that RJ can be patient during, and think about what cafeterias look like and smell like really for elementary school kids. That can be one of the most chaotic environments, I think, in the entire school. It's almost like a little mini jungle next to a playground. So if we think about, for RJ, it's not, and compare that to his classroom, it's not that he can't deal with lots of outside stimulus. Like cafeterias can be very, very loud. Kids are moving around, things are being dropped, all that sort of stuff. But there's something that gives RJ the ability to focus there that doesn't happen in class. And what I can notice is there's two things that stand out. For one, he might be really hungry. So for him sitting down to concentrate and eat all his food and be thoughtful about that, or he really enjoys that time, he can sit down and focus. The teacher is even willing to give him extended time there. But if we think about the opposite for his classroom, it can be just as chaotic as the cafeteria, but RJ is being asked to do something that he really doesn't like to do, or he really might feel that he's not capable of doing. Like he actually is like, I cannot do this. This is too complicated. It's going to take forever. So those little factors make the world of difference, but he enjoys his time by himself to sit down and eat. So what we're going to finish up next month is actually looking at, I think the way that we voted was we were going to start with coming up with alternative behaviors. That worksheet from the BHA worksheet to complete for RJ. So we're going to do these in order. I think because we've covered so much up to this point, we can start straight into our worksheet. So what I'll ask everybody to do is just before our next call next month is to review, to replay the recording and listen to it. So then what we'll do is at the top of the call, we'll start directly into doing the BHA worksheet. So by the time we complete the call, we will be able to have the age-appropriate, the implementation plan, the RJ's plan, and then see if there's things for his teacher and his mom that we need to give to the adults for like their adult given task on the plan. So does that sound like a plan? Does that sound okay for everybody? Is if we just start directly into working on the worksheets next time?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
So the last thing I want to say before everybody logs off, but don't forget, I will email out to you guys our one-day BHA conference is going to be July 30th in Oklahoma City from 9 to 5. And that day we're going to cover some practice, some engagement strategies that you can do with kids, like playing some games, interactive things that you can do. We're going to talk about how I'm going to ask you guys to pull in the rewards and incentives strategy from the PBIS model to implement that and use that with your kids. And what I'll have on the next call is I'll send out some information from that model, just like how Becky was saying for RJ. He's a physical kid, so she's put in the high fives and the fist pumps and all that sort of stuff. Those are things that come from the PBIS model. Sometimes the reward is not anything to give a child, but it may be actually something to do with a kid. So we'll talk about that a little bit on the call. We'll talk about that during our one-day conference, and then the other part that we will also talk about is looking at some of that, how to put these things into practice, how to use the PBIS stuff, and then if anybody's interested in going through the BHA training again next month, it will be 2 days, the 17th and the 18th in Tulsa, and it's going, the new way moving forward, the BHA training will have some of our trauma-informed pieces in the 101. So that's why it's been lengthened out to 2 days, but it'll be from 9 to 3 p.m. We don't have the links yet for this. I should have the links from Stacy by next week, but that will be in Tulsa. So I'll make sure to send everybody out that info, and you all have a great 4th of July weekend. If you have any questions or you need to troubleshoot any of the kids that are on your caseload that you're still working with over the summer and their families, feel free to call me or email me, and I'm here to support you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.